Days for a ceasefire in Gaza has recently finally been agreed. This is hugely welcome news, but you're probably wondering what this actually means.
What it absolutely does not mean is that it's time to look away. Israel continues to intensify its occupation in the West Bank, and within hours of the announcement, Israel had already bombed Gaza, something we've seen happen over 900 times in previous ceasefires.
A ceasefire doesn't end the lasting impacts of starvation and ecocide, and it doesn't end Israel's violent occupation of Palestine.
Families will still struggle to find clean water and food. Farmlands and fisheries have been deliberately destroyed, soil poisoned, and crops burned.
The land itself, the source of life, has been targeted. This isn't random destruction.
It's ecocide, the severe and deliberate destruction of ecosystem alongside genocide.
Israel has used starvation, food blockades, and the systemic destruction of food systems as tools of war. These are war crimes.
When Israel bombs farmlands, poisons the soil, and blocks access to the sea, this isn't just attacking the people, it's attacking their future.
It's destroying the very conditions needed to live on Palestinian land.
That's how ecocide becomes a weapon of genocide. It makes survival impossible and forces people to leave.
Yes, some aid is allowed in. This is important, but aid cannot replace self-sufficiency.
It can't rebuild ecosystems or restore sovereignty over land and food.
The almost 20,000 children killed by Israel's genocide over the last 2 years will never get to grow up.
Of those who have survived, tens of thousands have no remaining family left, and all of them will be traumatized beyond what most of us can even comprehend.
True peace isn't just the sound of silence after the bombs.
It's justice, dignity, freedom, and self-determination.
This November, the International People's Tribunal on the Forced Starvation and Ecocide in Palestine will be held in Barcelona, a people-led effort to hold Israel and the US accountable.
It will bring together Palestinian voices, witnesses, and experts to present evidence that can be used in future legal cases. This is a key moment to expose the ongoing and lasting impacts of Israel's genocide of Palestinians.
Those responsible for these crimes are yet to face accountability, but they will.
So keep speaking up, keep boycotting, divesting, and calling for sanctions.
Because a ceasefire cannot be the end.
We must stay in solidarity with Palestinians until the occupation ends and Palestine is free.
Okay, thank you to Mitzi, Micaela, and Disha. They are youth climate justice activists who shared that video of solidarity and to call for support for our tribunal. So greetings everyone and welcome to our online educational event for the Right to Resist International People's Tribunal for Palestine. For our third session, we've teamed up with the Ground Zero campaign to zero in on ecocide. We will deepen our collective understanding and confront ecocide as a historical crime fundamentally tied to the occupation, for which the U.S. Israel must be held accountable. I am Gail from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, please allow us to explain the language interpretation feature. We have interpretation available for Spanish, French, Indonesian, and Urdu today. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe icon on the Zoom menu bar. Please click this icon and select the language you need. If you do not see the globe, you may need to click the three dots titled More to find the interpretation option. Just a quick note, due to a technical issue with Zoom, we had to set the Urdu interpretation in the Japanese channel. If you need Urdu, please select Japanese. Our interpreters will also post this instruction in Urdu in the chat. So again, we have Spanish, French, Indonesian, and Urdu translation. And if you need to access the Urdu translation, please click the Japanese channel. Okay, so this event is being conducted in a webinar format, meaning only our speakers can use their microphones. We strongly encourage you to submit your questions in the question and answer box provided, and they will be posed to the speakers during our Q&A portion at the end. We are also live streaming this event. Please share the link now across your social media and with your contacts and organizations. We will monitor and include our questions coming in from those social media feeds. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the ILPS web platforms, including the Right to Resist website. Please note that no participants' names will be shown in the recording. So again, the link is in the chat box. Please share it widely so that everyone could tune in and join our discussion today. And with that, let's get started. Israel's occupation is not just killing people, it is destroying the environment. Through relentless bombing, infrastructure demolition, toxic material release, and military debris, the consequences are catastrophic. Water sources are contaminated, agricultural land and entire ecosystems are obliterated. Sanitation and waste management systems have collapsed, and unexploded ordnance is causing extensive lasting pollution. This environmental damage is severe and potentially irreversible. This is ecocide, the deliberate or reckless large-scale destruction of the environment in the context of war. While ecocide is not yet formally recognized as a standalone international crime like genocide or crimes against humanity in major treaties such as the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, its core elements are addressed under existing international law. Accountability must extend to this massive environmental destruction. Today, we will learn why we are charging Israel with genocide and ecocide. The right to resist, the Palestinian people versus the Zionist occupation and the US government is an international people's tribunal focusing on the US-backed Zionist occupation's war of forced starvation and ecocide in Palestine. This is a quasi-judicial forum convened to investigate and address alleged war crimes committed by Israel and its backers, namely the US, UK, France, Germany, and others. It serves as a vital platform for victims, advocates, and their organizations to present evidence and legal arguments related to the crimes committed against the Palestinian people. Despite its name, this tribunal is not merely a legal action, but it is a political action. Its primary objective is movement building, international solidarity, and increasing the power of the people. The legal proceedings that emerge from our People's Tribunal are designed to serve these objectives across all fields of struggle, far beyond the courtroom. It is for this reason that we present this crucial educational session in the build-up to the tribunal, this coming November 22 to 23 in Barcelona, Spain. If this is your first time hearing about the tribunal, you can learn more and get involved at internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. The link is also provided in the chat, so we encourage everyone to check out our website to learn more about our tribunal. To give you more of an idea of what role this tribunal plays in the overall international solidarity movement for Palestine, we will play this recent video from Tariq Rauf. I hope I pronounced the name right. A social media organizer from the Global Sumud Flotilla and an endorser of our tribunal.
Hey folks, I want to talk to you about a really cool thing that's happening in November called the International People's Tribunal for Palestine. It's being put on by International People's Front, International League of People's Struggles, and the People's Coalition of Food Sovereignty. And this tribunal is basically an attempt to gather testimonies and evidence against Israel and complicit governments and their war crimes against Palestinians, not just since October, but since the occupation began. Now, you might be wondering, what is a People's Tribunal? And a People's Tribunal is not necessarily legally binding. It's an attempt to basically gather evidence and showcase the evidence to the world, just kind of like the way that the ICC case isn't legally binding. It is a collection of evidence against nations complicit in genocide. Now, think of that similar to this, except this is not just about Israel's complicity in genocide, but Israel's complicity in their war crimes against humanity and Palestinians. Now, the process of a tribunal started back with the Vietnam War. The Russell Tribunal was the first ever people's tribunal to try and hold these governments accountable for the war crimes against innocent civilians. And while it wasn't legally binding, that tribunal changed the way that people talked about the Vietnam War because of the amount of evidence and testimonies that they gathered. And in South Africa in 2018, there was a People's Tribunal for the Economic Crimes. And that also led to evidence and reports that were then used to produce criminal referrals and reform. And I think one of the most crucial things that people need to understand about the fight for Palestine, specifically when it comes to cases like the ICC or the People's Tribunal, is that these are all attempts to just continue to gather evidence so that one day we can have accountability for the insane amount of injustice that those people are facing, that we are facing, that my people are facing, that my family's facing. So it's about to happen in Barcelona on November 22nd and 23rd could lead to a substantial amount of evidence that we can then continue to use against Israel and the United States and all of the complicit companies that are guilty of allowing this genocide to get to the point where it has. If you're interested in learning more or trying to figure out what you can do to help, go to internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal.
Thank you, Tariq, for that video. So for today's session, we will hear from two keynote speakers who will delve into ecocide, its legal status as a war crime under international law, and how it is being systematically perpetrated in Palestine. Following their presentations, we will gain a broader perspective from our reactors from India and the Philippines, who will share experiences from their own struggles against environmental crimes. We will conclude with a synthesis to consolidate the critical points, collective insights, and demands raised today. Without further ado, let us call upon our first speaker who will begin by discussing the crime of ecocide. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Farah Imad, legal expert of the Arab Group for the Protection of Nature. Farah has previously presented specialized legal papers on ecocide and the use of starvation as a weapon in similar tribunals. Her presentation will bridge the legal framework of ecocide with the practical reality of environmental destruction. So please go ahead, Farah.
Thank you, Gail, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We keep hearing this word ecocide and the context of the occupation and the context of Gaza, but what does it actually mean? How does it apply? What kind of relief can we expect to see from using this type of word? I'm going to go through, the history of this word and the evolution of this type of charge. So ecocide, as Gail said, it's not a formally recognized charge under international criminal law, but some nations have more recently adopted some definition of ecocide in their domestic laws, including Scotland, Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, Brazil, and other countries. I think over 20 other countries are considering including ecocide as a criminal charge in some context or other. The EU also recently adopted and expanded their environmental crimes to include damage such as ecocide. So we're seeing that this field is evolving, and we're hoping that with the continued pressure from activists, from countries that recognize this, that there will be a more expansive definition of ecocide and application thereto. In terms of what ecocide means, there are several definitions that have been presented. I will present the one that a few Pacific nation states used in their proposal to expand the Rome Statute, which is the statute that underlies the foundation of the International Criminal Court and is used in the cases against nation states and individuals for conducting international crimes, including, as Gail said, there are war crimes, crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, and genocide. So the proposal would be to expand the Rome Statute to include a fifth type of crime, which would be ecocide. It would be a standalone. And the definition that these countries presented was the unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment. I'll get to, the words and what they mean, but I want to stress that while this doesn't exist as a formal legal charge as of now, it does build on existing international law, and it's based on international humanitarian law as well as environmental law. And so we can see that this field is evolving from human rights law, where you have the right to a healthy environment, and that relies on the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as the Stockholm Declaration, which both have provisions that establish requirements and obligations on states to improve all aspects of the environment, and that individuals have the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Then we can, if we look towards the evolution of environmental law and environmental treaties, such as the 1992 Convention on Biological Diversity and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, we see that those treaties emphasize the protection of the ecosystems, biodiversity, and climate stability separate from human beings. And if we look towards international humanitarian law, and that's the bridge between these environmental concepts and the criminal context, we can see in the Geneva Convention's Additional Protocols 1 that there is a criminalization of environmental harm during armed conflict. Moreover, in the Rome Statute itself, while there is no formal recognition of ecocide, there is a crime that recognizes and criminalizes launching an attack in the knowledge that such attack will cause widespread, long-term, and severe damage to the natural environment. So, like I said, while it doesn't exist as a formal standalone charge, the background and the framework for ecocide is established in international law as well as in domestic law in multiple states. So while ecocide hasn't been formally prosecuted, neither on the international level or the domestic level, there are several instances that are widely cited as cases of ecocide. The first being the use of Agent Orange by the US imperialist army in Vietnam. And that's actually when the term ecocide was first used. More recently, the destruction of the Kakhovka dam in Ukraine was actually formally called an ecocide by Ukrainian officials. And there's a few instances separate outside of the context of war, such as the oil spills in the Niger Delta and the Alberta tar sands and Indonesian palm oil deforestation, which were primarily conducted by multinational companies. And those are also, cited and being used as examples of ecocide. So when we think about ecocide and the evolution of this field, we can see that it is a counter and a way to reject the colonial capitalistic system that we live in, which focuses on extraction and the externalization of harms. We can see that imperialist countries and companies focus only on their profits, what impacts them, and potentially, if anything, may only consider human harm in the context of the collateral damage, as they say. And when they think of the environment, they think of it only in a very direct, material way, only limited to the present harms. The way in which laws have traditionally been developed are made to benefit and further this extractive system. For example, even the concept of discounting, which is widely used and considered normal practice, basically considers that the future generations or the future of the earth is not as important as the present. And this is like a counter to indigenous thought, and it's a counter, it's against, you know, the laws of nature to a certain extent. I mean, and so when we look at how these countries even examine the environment, we can even just look to a very limited example of how the Israeli government commented to draft principles on the protection of the environment during war, which the International Law Commission was gathering to further these types of protections, and their comments were to widely reduce any sort of protections that are required on behalf of warring parties. For example, they don't want to protect all trees, they only want to protect fruit-producing trees. It's a very anthropocentric way of looking at the world. It doesn't consider the consequence for future generations at all. And this is an exemplary of the state of the world that these countries and these systems want us to live in. And so we're happy to see that there is a path towards recognizing ecocide, whether in the context of Palestine or otherwise, as part of the reclaiming indigenous thought, as well as reincorporating humans into nature rather than separate from nature. The challenges are numerous in terms of, one, getting the charge of ecocide recognized, but beyond that, in terms of, you know, its application. The way in which it's defined in terms of having, you know, wanton, widespread, long-term and severe damage is a really high threshold. It basically indicates that it would have to be an extreme event and not just any sort of conduct which we may consider lawful today, but is in fact destructive. And additionally, when we think about the application of this, first we need to increase the pressure on states and other bodies to apply ecocide. But beyond that, in a world where, you know, multinational companies have more power than some countries, we can question the extent to which international and even domestic law can really curtail these types of acts. We've seen that there's a lack of political will to sanction companies, to stop behaviors that could potentially lead to ecocide, despite their impact on nature and human society alike. I am going to hand the mic over to my colleague Muhammad to talk about applying ecocide in the context of Palestine, and I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you, Farah, for your discussion. So existing international humanitarian law uh does not recognize, wait. Okay, there. Existing international humanitarian law does recognize ecocide and prohibit environmental damage during armed conflict. But the challenge, as Farah had mentioned, is that the bar legally is high for prosecution and it's rarely met. But for our tribunal, we are asserting that the evidence presented today, particularly the calculated destruction, especially of Gaza, not only meets but far exceeds that high standard. By naming these crimes as ecocide, we are making a powerful assertion that environmental devastation, when used as a deliberate tool of war and occupation, to undermine the very survival of a people must be held accountable under the highest forms of international law. We are using this tribunal to establish the legal precedent and the political will necessary to criminalize environmental destruction globally. So, with that, we now shift our focus to the immediate impact of this crime. We are honored to have with us Mohammed Usrof, who will speak specifically about ecocide in Palestine. As the founder and executive director of the Palestinian Institute of Climate Strategy and a leading Palestinian researcher and climate justice advocate from Khan Yunis, Gaza, Mohammed will provide a crucial on the ground analysis of the environmental devastation and how it is intrinsically linked to sustaining colonial violence. So the floor is yours now, Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Gail. Thank you to PCFS and the partner organizations for hosting this. And thank you, Farah, for your incredible speech and for defining ecocide so clearly and from a legal context and background. I'll make my part just very direct and straightforward. And thank you for the introduction, Gail. I truly would always look at Palestine and what's happening in Gaza as a microcosm of the world on fire. It's a stubborn, sort of fragmented kind of sort of world that Palestinians currently live in, fragmented in terms of resistance, in terms of how the world looks at it, but it remains dignified. And the issue is that we also see how it becomes a microcosm of all different forms of struggle and how, although the world continues to burn on, extractive industries have had their stakes fall into Gaza and Palestine, and that has allowed the world to see the interconnections and how weaved together our struggle for liberation is with everybody else's, from Papua to India to Sudan and Congo, all the way to Fiji and Samoa, and even to the indigenous Americans in so-called America. So to us, this idea that the current genocide and ecocide is intrinsically connected to not only the military industrial complex or how narratives have been shaped by the media industrial complex and all the different corporations and just global powers that have been wanting to dominate Palestinians in Gaza and Palestinians in the West Bank for so long. We have seen how this has also become a site of power and a site of resistance. Now, what I wish to talk about here is on ecocide, which is the very destruction of life, the very logic of making the land uninhabitable. We have seen how it has gone from the intoxication of the soil to the complete systemic starvation of people, all the way to the destruction of the Gaza Valley, killing the fishermen, all the way to just making every form of life genuinely impossible. And that is through the engineering of our environment, so that even if the genocide ends, even if there's a ceasefire, Gaza cannot stand on by itself, and it needs the support of the global South and the global majority in resistance, so that what happened in Palestine does not happen moving forward. Because if it happened here, it's going to happen to the neighboring countries, and everybody else could be next. And we were not the first either. So I kind of reiterate from our manifesto, from the Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy, we came out with a climate justice manifesto that talks about ecocide. We've worked with multiple organizations, with people on the ground, with the Palestinian civil society, in terms of understanding what does ecocide look like and what does climate justice mean to us, and how do we now stand against the system of occupation, this possession, and kind of resist against that violence that is meant to contain and sustain global injustice. So what I wish to kind of bring over to the table today is that climate justice is completely inseparable from the ending of the occupation, from apartheid, from genocide, and from ecocide. So the key issue that we must do is to recognize and resist and rebuild. So again, comrades, this is where the manifesto starts, but I think we need to look at the reality on the ground, at the lived experience and the occupation. I mentioned the Gaza Valley, or Wadi Gaza. Wadi Gaza was a river, not a valley. It was a river from the Hebron highlands all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And it didn't dry up just from the effects of climate change, because Palestine is a country that is vulnerable to climate change, one of the most vulnerable. Gaza is one of the most vulnerable cities in Palestine, alongside the alongside Masafir Yatta in the West Bank. Now, the Gaza Valley used to be the living artery of Gaza. It used to be filled with birds. It used to be filled with biodiversity, and it allowed for filtered water to people and the migrating flocks of birds. Gaza used to be the land of civilizations across the world for millennia, being a connector of the African continent to the rest of the world, to Asia. So this is not just, as I said, the effects of climate change, and it isn't just time going by, but the occupation over the past 80 years through its infrastructure of apartheid, through a system of just illegal occupation, of setting up infrastructures of energy, of oil, of extraction, extracting from the Tamar and Leviathan gas fields on our shores, extracting from the Kirkuk Haifa pipeline. And that is all a policy that has been set by the British imperialists 100 years ago. And that continues today, as it is sustained by the British sort of colonialism, American imperialism, and the Israeli Zionist regime till today. And we see the complicitness of the neighboring countries and the complicity of the rest of the world through the sort of lack of accountability. And I sort of kind of endorse the tribunal, in the sense that we need more evidence collected on this matter. Now, we have had research that revealed the truth that the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, has long refused to confront, and that is that the occupation is a high emission project. It's a Zionist, colonial, militarized project that kills people. And since October 2023, the Israeli airstrikes have produced nearly 42 million tons of rubble. That is 14 times greater than all the previous wars in Gaza since 2008. And to clear that rubble, we would need another 55,000 tons of CO2 to be released, which is equal to circling the earth 600 times in a single breath of smoke. And that is just a complete abomination. That is not just a Palestinian local issue, but that is affecting climate change worldwide, where the air emissions, the carbon emissions are not going to impact just our air, but it's going to contribute to climate change all across the world. And that is the case today with climate change and climate justice, where people don't recognize that it is a unequal equation, where the global north is the one that exploits, consumes, profits, and the global south is the one that goes extinct, not just in wars, but due to climate change all across the world. So this is just to say that this is not an accident, but a continued engineered system of oppression. And we have done a sort of an accountability system where we revealed that the Israeli occupation owes, in terms of just climate reparations debt that they owe to the Palestinian people, $148 billion. And that is $100 billion coming from Israel, $40.8 billion coming from the US, and $2.7 billion coming from Germany. And that is specifically just on the climate reparations framework. And I'm sure on the legal definition of ecocide, there's much more that goes to that, and much, much more in terms of actual Palestinian reparations due to the 78 plus years of occupation. But one of the key issues that me and my organization look at, and what a larger energy embargo movement looks at, is how the occupation is not just powered by the Zionist regime or by weapons, but is powered by fossil fuel. And fossil fuels continue to not only fuel the missiles and the tanks and the drones and even international energy systems that have traded our blood for barrels, as seen in South Africa, as seen in Colombia, and as well as in Turkey through the BTC pipeline. We have seen these countries continue trading with Israel in terms of oil and gas. And this web of pipelines, ports, refineries continue to bind Israel's war machine to global capitalism. And we call that fossil capitalism. And we see today that Israel's Air Force runs on JP-8 jet fuel supplied by Valero Energy, and that has been a long-standing contract with the U.S. Defense Agency, and it's a $3 billion contract. And since October 7, we have had over 90,000 barrels of jet fuel cross the Atlantic, stopping in Algeciras, Crete, and in Italy, and all across, so Cyprus and Italy, and even the entire European Union is complicit because of their continued trade with Egypt through the Arab gas pipeline, throughout the Ashkelon-Arish pipeline, that all bypasses Palestinian waters. So I mentioned this all in relation to ecocide because not only does it violate Palestinian waters, but it also doesn't give us our royalty, as should be the case for every sovereign country that is under occupation here, because they are exploiting and extracting our resources and then selling it without the EU, in this case, having the legal royalty that it should pay. And we see today, especially with COP30 in Brazil taking place next week, how Brazilian crude oil extracted by Petrobras and Shell found its way all the way in Italy, and that is the world's largest private oil trader. So Israel, although South Africa and Colombia and Brazil and all these different countries have pledged solidarity, their oil continues to go through European intermediaries and onto Palestine. That continues to kill us. And this is to say that the ecocide is not run just by soldiers, is not occupied by soldiers, is not just, we're not killed by unnamed and anonymous missiles. We're completely occupied by a denial of recognition of humanity, and by the occupation of supply chains. We're occupied by this infrastructure that has set itself for 100 years. So this is to say that our focus should be on demilitarization as part of the larger discussion on ecocide. But what I do want to say is that besides that, there's the issue of water, and the way that that reflects into sort of real life is through water being so intoxicated and so sort of generally rivers turn into sewage that now flows into the streets of Gaza, and that then makes it unusable. And we have seen how mothers boil brown water for infants and how hospitals sterilize instruments with rainwater. We have seen testimonies from Palestinian families how they cannot feed their children anymore due to the lack of food. And some mothers and their children have gone on water and just water for the span of weeks when the systemic starvation was intensifying. And the same applies today to a lot of families in Gaza. Amira, 24 years old, for example, from Sheikh Radwan, has said that she was pregnant during the blockade. She went 4 days without bread, fruit, or protein, and without folic acid or iron. Her child developed war-related deformities, and his lungs and bladder completely missing. And the doctors told her that the fetus could not live. And that is one out of so many cases where just failed abortions and just so many other issues couldn't. It's part of our ecocide system because of the environmental conditions that Palestinians now live in. So the land is completely uninhabitable, and we've seen that not just on the land but on the sea, because Palestinians cannot get the food that they need or the produce that they need, because all of it has been destroyed and fishermen have been killed out of the sake of protection of oil and gas fields in our Gaza seashores. And to me, that is just a complete definition of what climate apartheid and ecocide and genocide is, and not just famine and not just complete murder of people, but this is something that people don't necessarily realize, and this complete negligence and just complete ignoring the fact that Palestinians are going through this is an abomination. It's an embarrassment of our world today. And issue is that this is a pattern that we see in every part of the world today. What's happening in Sudan is exactly similar to that. What's happening in Papua, in West Papua, is exactly the same. And the same applies to every other country where there's profit, where there's interest in exploiting and extracting and making land uninhabitable for the sake of benefit. I'll end by just talking about one last section that I think is really important for people to be aware about, and that is solar geoengineering. Solar geoengineering is a false climate solution that every country has urged people not to use. And yet a US Israeli company continues to experiment indoors and experiment outdoors, and they fundraise hundreds and millions of dollars, nearly $200 million as of 2 weeks ago. And that company is currently experimenting over historic Palestine. And what that means is that, and largely, part of a lot of its funding comes from the IDF, comes from the Ministry of Defense, comes from AWZ Ventures and Silicon Valley capitalists that really just wish to fuel empire and have run the genocide in Gaza through its weaponry, AI, and surveillance technologies. So why is it investing in climate solutions? Why is it allowing this solar geoengineering sort of project to take place? And it just shows us that solar radiation management technologies have dual usage of so-called solving the climate crisis, but then also potentially being used in a settler military context as a tool for occupation and further apartheid. So ultimately, what I do wish to say, and to end my note here, is that there must be commitments from the world, such as banning unilateral geoengineering, such as ending environmental apartheid, and establishing a public financed, locally governed, globally supported system for the Palestinians to think about rebuilding Gaza. We should have the commitment to actually have a full energy embargo and a full arms embargo, and inclusion of military and conflict emissions in our climate discussions and negotiations. Besides the fact that we need to recognize ecocide as a legal stature in the Rome Statute. And point is, this must be a vow from the people. This must be something that comes from all of us all across the globe as a commitment to humanity, as a commitment to our own struggles, to connect solidarity struggles and to connect struggles against apartheid, against genocide, against systemic starvation, against the very co-optation of our own governments, all the way from Nepal, Bangladesh, Philippines, to the United States with the rise of fascism as we see it today. So I return to just the Gaza Valley and say that as it was a river for life, now it has become a trench of waste, but beneath that are poisoned soil, but seeds that still remain to wait. And those seeds need to be nurtured. They will wait for rain, they will wait for justice, and they will wait for return. And our vow is to make sure that those seeds rise again and again. So let us carry memory and let us promise renewal to the Palestinian people and ensure that we will overcome the genocide no matter what happens time and time again. And let us not forget that genocide is continuing. It has not stopped. It will not stop, no matter who promises its end, as the genocide will continue for another few decades in terms of rebuilding, in terms of just combating capital and just the global hegemony power. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mohammed, for your very, very powerful input. Indeed, we are going to overcome this genocide and ecocide that's happening in Palestine. So Mohammed laid out the undeniable link between environmental destruction and the political struggle for the liberation of Palestine. The climate crisis is not merely a threat multiplier For Palestinians, it is a daily reality and a weapon of oppression. We heard about the lived reality on the ground, from the tragic contamination of Palestine's land and natural resources to the decades-long destruction of infrastructure and environment. This devastation directly enables the systematic denial of food and water, pushing the population toward a man-made famine that is in itself a weapon of genocide. This leads us to a crucial realization. The struggle for climate justice is completely inseparable from resisting the occupation, apartheid, and genocide. This is why we must call out the complicity of countries, particularly the imperialist US and their allies, in perpetuating this violence. And we must condemn the institutions that fail to act, such as the UNFCCC, as well as the complicit governments, which have long refused to confront the occupation as a Zionist colonial project. And hopefully, our tribunal is our platform to force that confrontation, asserting that sovereignty over land and ecosystems is essential to Palestine's liberation. Okay, so before we move on, we would like to thank the endorsers of the International People's Tribunal. As of today, we have over 80 official or endorsing organizations, and the list grows almost daily. Again, we call you to endorse our tribunal by visiting internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal-endorse. So the link will be provided in the chat. So if your organization hasn't endorsed it, please do. You can express your organization's endorsement by sending members to attend the tribunal in November, by announcing your support publicly and encouraging other organizations to endorse, donating to support the work, and much more. So if you endorse, you will also get your name shown on our website. We want to thank all of our endorsers that you can see right here. So we will be playing their videos as we go along with our program today. So we will now watch a few of them from our endorsers about why they chose to endorse the IPT for Palestine. So here is Majed and from the ILPS Commission 6.
We are to endorse the International People Tribunal in Barcelona. It is one of the most powerful action and manifestos for people's struggle to unite together for Palestine, but also for the oppressed, for Gaza, and against this brutal genocide where my family is part of it, my community is like suffering every day and resisting it every day as well. Together, we can do a lot, but if we're not organized, we don't sing and narrate, take power and reclaim the narrative, we will never decolonize. We will never defeat the imperialists and the empire and those colonizers and Zionists was actually, he took so much of our life. Let's bring our life back. But there is a lot of hope. And this tribunal will bring us together, bring this hope together and get to know each other. Palestine from here in Frankfurt to Philippines. Thank you.
My name is Rafael Mariano of ILPS Peasant Commission. Commission 6 on the concerns for genuine agrarian reform and peasants' rights. The Peasant Commission of the International League of People's Struggle endorses the International People's Tribunal for Palestine to be held from November 22, 23, 2025 in Barcelona, Spain. The struggle of the Palestinian people is deeply connected to the peasant struggle for land, justice, and liberation. As people who resist land grabbing, imperialist plunder, and militarization of our farmlands, our struggles are mirrored in the eyes of every Palestinian. We stand in full solidarity with the Palestinian people and their right to resist occupation and genocide. By every means available to them, under international law. And we call on all peasants and farmers organizations in the world to support and endorse the People's Tribunal for Palestine because the right for liberation of the Palestinian people is linked to our own liberation against imperialist aggression. So from our farms to Palestine, from our deserts, our barangays, our movements, our villages, to the refugee camps, the fight is one. Free Palestine, done with the occupation of Zionist Israel, done with imperialism.
Okay, again, that was Majed Abu Salama in Germany. So he was attending the counter event to the Zionist supporting Frankfurt Book Fair. And also, thank you to Kapaeng Mariano, representing Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas and the Peasant Commission of the International League of People Struggles. So thank you again to our endorsers, and please consider endorsing your organization today as well. We now move to the next portion of our program. As we have seen, the environmental and ecological crimes detailed here are not isolated incidents. They are systematically inflicted on communities resisting imperialism and neo-colonialism across the world. We will now bring in the voices of our international reactors to express their solidarity with Palestine and share their direct experiences. Hailing from India and the Philippines, they will show how the crimes of ecocide and environmental destruction are being carried out in their own nations, thus underscoring the vital, critical connection between climate justice and national liberation globally. Our first reactor joining us from India is Dr. Basvi Kiro, a prominent journalist turned social activist and a leading advocate for indigenous Adivasi communities in the state of Jharkhand, East India. Dr. Kiro is a co-founder and current leader of the Torang Trust, an organization established to protect and revitalize the Adivasi people's land rights, culture, and traditional healing systems. Her work focuses on resisting the systematic displacement and erasure of Adivasi heritage caused by large-scale development and resource extraction projects. She has been deeply involved in landmark movements like the Kowel Karo and the Detarhat struggles, fighting for the right to self-determination and against the devastating environmental consequences of development aggression and colonial and neo-colonial exploitation. So go ahead, Dr. Basvi.
Thank you very much, Gail. Thank you so much to give me an opportunity to talk about indigenous tribal people of India. And thank you very much to give my brief introduction. And I I want to give thanks to our previous speaker, Farah and Osraf. They gave very beautiful statement regarding Palestine genocide and ecocide, whatever is going on there since long. And genocide is still it's going on, and how long it will go, nobody knows. And we are just protesting and supporting our providing our solidarity only. So here in India, we are also protesting on WhatsApp. There are WhatsApp different group on Palestine genocide, and we are opposing this genocide and ecocide. I want to talk about tribal India, where I am working since last 30 years. See, whatever is going on in Palestine is a genocide or ecocide, but in India, in the name of development, tribal people, they are losing their land, their forest, their traditional habitats, their land, livelihood, language, literature, everything, their identity completely they are losing in the name of development. See, in India got independence in 1947. Before 1947, there were tribal revolt in different parts of tribal India to save their land, resource, and territory, which talk about this about in United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, announced by United Nations in uh, 2007, 13 September. So, in the name of development, tribal people, how they are losing land. I want to give some examples. And still in every parts of tribal India, there are tribal movements are going on in each and every parts of tribal India. See, in India, tribal people where they are residing, there are mines, minerals, and rich natural resources. Tribal people, they are living in their territory, their language, literature, and with their identity. But government and private companies like Adani, may all of you heard about Adani, is a very famous industrialist, and he wants coal mining. And our Indian Prime Minister, he is helping Mr. Adani. And in Jharkhand, where my home state is Jharkhand, eastern part of India, Adani, he wants tribal land because in under the tribal land there is coal, and he wants mining. He wants coal mining, and want to earn more and more money. And as Osraf and Faraz they said, the capitalist people they don't bother this humanity and culture and climate and land rights, livelihood. So in Jharkhand, in certain parts, there are coal storage. 49% of coal storage in our eastern part of India, in our state. And they have started mining. They are violating so many rules. Where we are living is comes under Indian Constitution. It called Fifth Schedule. Fifth schedule is a very different provision under Indian Constitution, where tribal people are living. It they are this area called scheduled area, and it comes under fifth schedule area. As per fifth schedule provisions, nobody, even government or any private agency, they cannot do mining or any kind of land loot or land acquisition process can be done. But violating all these in the provisions of Indian Constitution, they are violating this rule and constitute provisions of Indian Constitution, and they are starting mining, coal mining. Even there are so many laws are there to protect and safeguard tribals, indigenous people of India, like Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Area 1996. And as per this Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Area 1996, and no one can take their land, no one can take tribal land. But they are not bothering. They are violating this Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Area in tribal area. And it is happening in each and every parts of India where tribal people are living. There are 10 states where this fifth schedule is prevailing. And apart from these 10 states, there are other states where tribal people are living, and their forest, their land, and their territory is completely destroying. Forest degradation is going on because in forest area, government and private company, they want to start mining without any forest clearance. They want to start mining in forest area. And in the tribal area in India, mostly this sal tree, the sal forest, Soria robusta is a botanical name, and sal tree, it generates water. And tribal people, they worship this sal tree. And when this flower bloom in sal tree, tribal people, they celebrate Sarhul. Is a festival. When flower bloom, tribal people, they celebrate nature. They worship nature, and they say ki we are nature worshipper, and we need to save forest, we need to save salty, because salty gives water. It's a sacred tree, and it gives livelihood also, because tribal women, they make uh, they make you uh, utensils like a plate and cup from this sal leaf, and they sell it, and they run their livelihood. But all these things, because of mining in forest area, it is it's forests are forest cuttings are going on, and it degradation of forest is rampant going on in tribal area. See, in our Jharkhand state, there is a very famous forest. It is famous in Asia. It called Saranda Forest. So recently, Supreme Court of India, he gave an order that in government, Jharkhand government should make a sanctuary, should make a park in Saranda Forest area. In Saranda forest area, there are whole tribal people. They are living there, and it's a forest village. And people, they are living with forest, and forest is livelihood. There are so many forest producers are there, and people are completely depending on forest. So Supreme Court is saying, ki no, you will have to be announced a certain part of Saranda forest as a sanctuary. And tribal people, they have started agitation, they protesting not to announce this Saranda forest as a sanctuary. Very recently, 15 days ago, all these things has government is saying ki we want to bring tribal people into mainstream. What does it mean by mainstream? You are mining coal, you are mining bauxite, you are mining uranium, you are mining uh, mm, uh, mm, limestone, you are mining iron ore. So many mines, minerals are there in eastern part of India, and you want only mining. You don't bother tribal people. So what we are saying ki this corporate companies, multinational companies, or our mm, local corporates, or they love our resources only. They don't love indigenous people. They only want to uproot tribal people, and they want to loot their natural resources, mines, minerals, land, forest, territory, everything. So where I am living nearby, 20 kilometers away, there is a place. It called Heavy Engineering Corporation. It was established in 1960, 62, 64. This Heavy Engineering Corporation, it has started working, and it has to be establish steel factory to establish so many steel factory in India. And that time in 1960, 32 villages were uprooted, and all tribal people got displaced. They got only 10 decimal of land. Each family now they are living in each 10 decimal of land. Now third generation of displaced people. They have come up and they are struggling. They are saying ki we don't have education, we don't have hospital facility, we don't have livelihood support, where we will go? So they lost their land, and they become poor and poor, and they are living like a beggar in their land. So in the name of development, see, our first prime minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he said that all these factory, all these big uh, uh, factory will be a modern uh, will build a modern India. It is a temple and church and mosque of modern India. He said like that. But what happened when once tribal people they lost their land, and outsider people they come into in tribal area, and they become officers, MD, CMD, technical director, and so many posts created, and in heavy engineering corporation they become big officer, and tribal people they become a labor, like a labor, and even they did not get a job in heavy engineering corporation. So what I'm trying to say, in the name of development in India, tribal people are facing like a genocide. It's not uh, bleeding. It's not like a bleeding. Heavy blood is not like a bloodbath, but gradually they are dying, because once they uprooted from one place to another, they another place where they resettle and rehabilitate, there no water facility, no health facility, no education, no university, no colleges, no nothing, livelihood, no livelihood. So every tribal people they become a labor. Morning time they go to outside, they work, they hard work, and late evening they come and they cook food, and they eat. So in the name of development, tribal people become poorer and poorer. So our
Basvi,
politics, yeah.
please wrap up. Thank you.
Okay. So in India, there are since 1947 to till date, about more than 8 crores tribal people were uprooted, and without any rehabilitation and resettlement policy. And after still people are we are struggling to make a resettlement and rehabilitation policy. And at last, I want to say that after a long struggle, in 2006, the Scheduled Tribe and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act has come into existence. But tribal people, they are not getting their land over forest area. And as per this Forest Rights Act, government has announced that tribal people they faced historical injustice. So we will meet in historical injustice, and we will finish this historical injustice. So in every and each parts of tribal India, we are facing so food security, climate justice, this ecocide. Completely, it's going on since last 60, 70 years. Like a Palestine, like India is a part in tribal India. It's like a Palestine. In the name of development, this ecocide and genocide, in the name of development, it's going on. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And there are so many things to tell, but it is a less time. I can't speak much in within 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Basvi. And thank you for bringing the perspective of the tribal India or the indigenous Adivasi resistance to this discussion. Your insights showed us that the fight against ecocide is inseparable from the Adivasi people struggle. The calculated theft of water, forest, land from Adivasi communities in Jharkhand is driven by entities like the Adani Group, which Basvi was talking about earlier. With government backing, they push massive mining as well as coal and power projects that result in forced displacement, the destruction of the forest areas, and the poisoning of water sources, all in violation of the Adivasi land rights. And this fundamentally mirrors the colonial mechanisms of dispossession used against Palestinians. The defense of ancestral land in Jharkhand, like the Palestinian resistance, is not merely an environmental protest. It is the existential fight for sovereignty and the right to exist on one's own land. The solidarity is our power, and it confirms the truth of our tribunal that justice for Palestine is justice for all the indigenous people fighting against corporate ecocide for their land and for their self-determination. Okay, so we now move to our second reactor from the Philippines. We call on Rachel Junsai, or Ray, who is a leading voice in the youth movement for climate justice. So Ray is the national coordinator of the Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, or YACAP, which is part of the bigger People Rising for Climate Justice, or PRCJ, a cross-movement people's campaign network for climate justice. PRCJ recently organized the International Solidarity Mission in the Philippines, which brought global attention to the state violence and displacement faced by local communities resisting environmental plunder. So Ray will talk about more about that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gail. So, allow me to share my screen real quick as I prepared a short presentation. But today, in relation to the ongoing discussion about the ecocide, I would also like to share on what's happening, the lived experiences of the people in the Philippines. So, for the bigger context, currently, the Philippines is one of the most dangerous country in Asia for environmental defenders. This has been proven with the many cases of arrest of environmental defenders, abductions, and even deaths. And this is the data according to Global Witness. And later on, it is going to be more visible as to how these kind of environment manifest to our environmental defenders on the ground. It is further fueled by the rising efforts of our national government to silence environmental defenders through legal and state resources, such as the NTF-LCAC, or the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, which has become a tool for our government to silence and dissent environmental defenders, activists who are fighting for land rights or fighting for human rights and environmental protection, as well as the implementation of the anti-terror law, another mechanism that our government has been using to silent our environmental defenders. And so, given this bigger context, we at PRCJ, or People's Rising for Climate Justice, has organized an international solidarity mission, or the Grounding Solidarity, which is a pre-conference initiative to bring together different delegates from all over the world and integrate with the communities in the Philippines to explore, expound, and further advocate for the lived experiences, for the constant human rights violations that our environmental defenders has been facing on the ground here in the Philippines. And so I will be sharing a bit of the stories from the different regions that our international delegates have experienced. But for the context, we visited 4 different regions. One of it is being Negros Occidental, which is home to the corporation called Happy, or the Hacienda Asia Plantation Incorporation, wherein they have their palm oil project, and this project has really been used by this corporation to displace and to further minimize the livelihood of the farmers living in the areas of Negros Occidental. So not only are they doing a lot of environmental destruction through the poisoning of their waters, through the destruction of the plantations of our local farmers, but there has also been a lot of found human rights violations as per the story shared by the communities there. A lot of labor abuses. Most of the projects done by the Happy or the incorporation does not have any prior and informed consent. And the one that is most prevalent, and even in the other regions that the delegates have visited, is the constant military intimidation and harassment and red tagging, wherein the community leaders, the farmers, are constantly being surveillance, continuously being visited by a lot of military forces, and are even provided with trumped up charges on false accusations of supporting being fake surrenderies, supporting rebels, and even going as far as constantly visiting these farmers and doing house raids. We also visited another area, which is in Tanay Rizal, wherein we visited the community of the Dumagat Remantado indigenous people, which are victims to the ongoing project of the Kaliwa Kanan Laiban Dam, a dam that is a combination of different foreign investments financed by different foreign institutions, wherein it is expected that these projects will submerge a lot of communities in the area. Most of it are indigenous people. It will worsen the flooding in the area, and it will only further ruin the livelihood and the living situation in the communities in Tanay Rizal. Moreover, and this is not just during the visit of the delegates, but a lot of the cases that were present during the sharing of different stories was that there were a lot of locals who reported the use of trumped-up charges against leaders as fake surrenderies, which is a program done by the Philippine military to silence opposition, since a lot of these farmers are constantly advocating for their rights. And what's worse is that they also go out of their way to kill these environmental defenders, to do extrajudicial killings of local leaders just to prevent movements from arising, just to prevent themselves from advocating for their rights. And those are some stories similar to what we also found in another community that we visited, which is in Abra de Ilog in Occidental Mindoro, where we visited another indigenous people community of the Mangyan Iraya in Sitio Malatabaco, who are facing displacement due to land claims by Peaceland Corps presidents, wherein they are facing a lot of human rights violations from the corporations and their armed goons. Most of it are, of course, land grabbing, and these are all done even with the support using national policies to further institutionalize or to further allow their land grabbing to take place, despite the farmers having titles to their own land. They also do a lot of hamleting, and particular to the community, they have shared a lot of stories of really having food blockades, something that is also very similar to what is happening in the Palestine, wherein the corporations are placing armed goons, placing armed military men to prevent food from getting into the community and to prevent them from reaching towards the arable land that they use for their livelihood, for their daily sustenance. And this has also caused a lot of trauma to the families, as there has been a lot of violent seizures of land. And for the last community that we visited, in Eastern Visayas, there they have discovered a lot of landlessness, poverty, and militarization that harm rural livelihoods. Particular to this area, they have discovered a lot of infrastructure projects that are highly prone to corruption, something that is highly talked about now in the Philippines. The connection of not only is there the power of bureaucrat capitalist individuals who use the government as a tool to profit more money, but also use state military, use intimidation to further fuel their power over these infrastructure projects and further degrading our environment. But those are just some of the stories that are shared by the communities. More so, something that is common among all of these visits that we did is that the constant presence of intimidation and military monitoring all throughout the visit. And even when we left the communities, we have heard stories from the communities who are continuously still being visited by military, continue being faced with trumped-up charges, and are now military personnel visiting their homes, scaring them from the visits that happened in the days prior. So these are just some of the photos, and we can see how militarization has really been a tool for not just our local government, but even the power of these U.S. imperialist nations to continue their domination over our countries using development projects such as energy-related projects, plantations, to displace farmers, to get rid of the livelihood of these communities, and also allow profiting of foreign investments without putting in the interest of the Filipino people. So those are just some of the lived experiences that we have heard and we have seen that our Filipino people have been experiencing. Additional to that, that visit, that 1 week of international solidarity mission has gained a lot of attention from the NTF-LCAC, wherein they really put a lot of effort, a lot of their machineries to really badmouth and produce black propaganda about the solidarity mission, going as far as producing articles and videos to counter our mission. But in fact, what we wanted was to show international solidarity, was to expose how these state forces are really using state resources to further silence and further inflict human rights violations. And therefore, this just goes to show that although those 1 week of visit is just some of the stories that we've heard, these are similar experiences that we have in other regions of the country, in other regions in India, and even in the regions of Palestine. And we have seen that these are all because of the immense presence of these imperialist nations fighting domination over our countries for their own interests, while also, killing people, also putting kids in hunger, and destroying our environment. So this continuous wars of aggression to divide the world's resources is the biggest threat to not only the Filipino people, not only to the Indian people, to the Palestinian people, but to the people all over the world. And therefore, as we finish our international solidarity mission and as we go forward with the mention already earlier of COP30 and even with initiatives after that, is that we see that from Palestine, from Philippines, and from across the world, it is imperialism that is the root cause of the climate crisis, and that this presence of US and other imperialist nations has further exacerbates the exploitation and oppression of the people. And therefore, it is very imperative that we recognize that the struggle for climate justice is also a struggle for social justice. And so we in the Philippines, we are one in the call for with the people of Palestine, with the people of Congo, West Papua, and the other nations fighting for their own self-liberation struggle. We share our international solidarity to the people all over the world. As we achieve for a society that is free from exploitation and that is a pro people and pro planet one. So just for a quick share, I guess, but we are also available for deeper conversations about this. We can follow People's Rising for Climate Justice, and you can also join our mailing list. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ray, for your sharing, no, for sharing the stark reality from the Philippines. The pattern of violence documented by the International Learning and Solidarity Mission, so that's state-backed, state-perpetrated violence in particular, across 4 provinces is a clear case of corporate ecocide that is state-backed as well. The findings confirm that the climate crisis is not an environmental issue in isolation. Rather, it is a crisis deepened by corruption and militarization. This also reveals the identical structures of oppression used against the Palestinian people. So, for instance, Ray mentioned about the eviction, the food blockades, the terror tagging, the weaponized legal cases, even if there are protective laws, that Filipino farmers and indigenous peoples face precise that farmers and IPs face in the Philippines. And they mirror the use of famine and the legal manipulation as instruments of war against the Palestinian people. Therefore, our global solidarity must be rooted in the active, sustained support of these local struggles for land, life, and self-determination against imperialism, which is the root of the climate crisis, exploitation, and oppression that the people experience globally. So thank you again, Ray. We're supposed to have another reactor. So that's Esther Haluk from West Papua, but unfortunately, she couldn't join us anymore. So with that, we deeply thank all of our speakers for your insightful and powerful inputs. What you have presented makes it clear. Climate justice is impossible without Palestinian liberation. Recognizing these crimes as ecocide is critical, not just for justice in Palestine, but for establishing a legal precedent for holding perpetrators of environmental devastation accountable worldwide. The International People's Tribunal is our collective assertion that this ecological crisis demands global accountability. So before we move into our question and answer portion, we would like to play another round of videos featuring our organizational endorsers of the tribunal.
Hi everyone, I'm João Guiar from Brazil. And last month I was on the Mykonos boat. I was part of the Global Sumut Flotilla mission. I'm part of the coordination of the Brazilian delegation team of the Global Sumut Flotilla. And we tried to break the siege. Unfortunately, we didn't do that, but I think that we made other important things, and I would like I would like to say that I think that we didn't break the physical siege, but I think that we start to break the media siege. That's so important too. And the other thing that we are building now, what we are making now, that we're building a root and beautiful chain of solidarity. All the world are connected with this chain of this solidarity, and we can break this chain now. It's important to stay together, all of us. I'm here to show my support of a beautiful and necessary event, the International People Tribunal, that will be happen on Barcelona in November 22 and 23 of November. We can't stop while these people who are committing crimes sit on the dock and they're tried for crimes against the humanity. And it's important to say also that there's no peace without accountability. There's no justice without a self-determination. So we'll never stop until the Palestinian is truly free. And I'm here to send hugs and to show my support of this beautiful event. Unfortunately, I can't stay there with you guys, but my heart and my soul will stay with you in this 22 and 23 of November of this beautiful and necessary event, International People Tribunal. And I would like to invite everyone that can stay there, can be this event, and will be very important for us, very important for the Palestinian people. I'm here to send the support and to send my hugs and to state that we are all together in this cause of the Palestinian people. Free Palestine.
Marhaba wa salamat. My name is Hannah Osgal, and I'm with We Rise Production, a collective of creatives telling the freedom struggles of our time through community collaborations and digital media. We tell the stories of diaspora rising for their motherlands from Palestine to the Philippines, of indigenous kin who are protecting their ancestral lands and water from Chitka Kwan to Standing Rock to inspire solidarity and resistance. The Palestinian people have every right to utilize whatever means necessary to pursue truth, accountability, justice, and for the full liberation of their homelands and of their livelihoods. Which is why we endorse this People's Tribunal on Palestine as a means of the people who are taking matters into their own hands to build liberated worlds. We invite all of those whose struggles are bound with the Palestinians, who are facing off against the same state and extractive actors who utilize the same features of ecocide and starvation to subjugate us, to join us at this tribunal to pursue the Palestinian cause and joint liberation. All power to the people, the Palestinian people, and to the oppressed masses of the world.
Again, that was Joe Aguiar, coordinator of the Brazil delegation of the Global Sumut Flotilla, and Hannah Alzgal from We Rise Production. So thank you again to all our endorsers, and we again encourage everyone here to endorse the tribunal by visiting internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal-endorse. Again, the link is available in our chat box. So we will now go into our question and answer portion. You can type your questions into the Q&A box and we will post them to the speakers. You can either direct your question to all the speakers in general or name a specific speaker you would like to hear from. You may also raise your hand to unmute and ask your question verbally. So before we read the questions in the Q&A, maybe anyone who would like to ask their questions live, please raise your hand so that we could acknowledge you. Okay, well, there's still nobody raising their hand. We have a few questions that have been raised in our chat box. Okay, so maybe one of our speakers could comment on this. The genocides, I hope I pronounced that right, have made it illegal to remove soil samples from Gaza since 2014. Now, they have destroyed most capacities for scientific analysis inside the strip. This means we don't know what military toxins are bioaccumulating. And the agricultural land is now in the quote-unquote yellow zone. In these conditions, how can we find a way to test soils in the GS? And who will clean up the rubble and rebuild the land and make it viable to support life again in Palestine? Imperialist companies again? Okay. So that's one of the questions in our chat. Maybe either Farah or Mohammed could answer that question since it's specific on Gaza.
Hi, Gail. It seems, is Muhammad still on or?
Let's check. Mohammed is not in the room. I will follow up on him. Okay. Maybe in the meantime, we move to the next question since I think he is the person to answer that. Unless you would like to answer it, Farah.
I mean, I think we all are struggling to make sense of the situation and the numerous violations accountable at this point in Gaza. So I don't have an answer for you because I don't think there is an answer. You need to continue. I guess the one answer is to continue to put pressure on governments, on international organizations, to continue to protest, to boycott, to raise awareness every way possible. So I work, I volunteer with the Arab Group for the Protection of Nature, which has some agricultural projects in Gaza, and it's been very difficult to reach the farmers and to even get them the inputs to be able to grow the soil despite the circumstances. Of course, we are actively doing that despite the challenges. But in terms of getting the soils to be able to test, that's something we haven't been able to do. As you can imagine, like you said, the capabilities inside are quite limited, and it's totally shut out. But I appreciate the question, and I will direct it internally to the organization to see if there's anything they can do to be able to do that.
Thank you, Farah, for answering or responding to the question. Maybe we could call first those who have raised their hands among our attendees. So first is Alana Gomez. Okay, your mic is on now. You could ask your question live. Alana,
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me?
could you please quickly introduce yourself and your organization?
Hi, I'm Aliana and
I'm
I'm from the Philippines. And I've been active with um with PPFA, Palestine Friendship Association. And yeah, and my question is um are there precedents where environmental destruction this severe has been prosecuted under existing laws for crimes against humanity? Because I agree with the speaker earlier when they said that the destruction of Gaza's environment is not collateral damage. It's part of the strategy to make Palestinian lives impossible.
okay. I
And
think, Farah, that question is for you. Go ahead, Aliana. Please
yeah,
continue.
and when the humanitarian aid is blocked and the environment is poisoned, what responsibility does the global community have beyond statements of concern? Yeah.
Thank you, Aliana, for the question. I totally agree. It's not collateral damage. None of this is collateral damage. It is by design. And it is part of the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. But beyond that, there is a very cynical view that some of these companies and state actors have in terms of extracting resources. In terms of what we can do, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to boycott. We need to pay attention. We need to know where we are spending our money, who we're working for, um, how we're spending our time. As you know, especially nowadays with the proliferation of social media and digital technologies and even AI, it's a way in which all of our time and resources are being not only wasted, but more so than that, our data, our information, our intellectual property is being used and abused um, for these corporate interests. We can see even how the Israeli government used information from WhatsApp to target family members of alleged Hamas members, and they use that to attack people and bomb entire families. So we really need to be more intentional. Our bodies and our time and our money are so critical, and this is what these companies want. If we consume less, they make less money. If we use less, then there's no the desire for them to continue to extract minerals from the earth for profit will reduce. So it's really on us to be more active and to be more intentional. And thank you again for that question.
Gail, you're muted right now.
Sorry. Okay, so as I was saying, thank you, Farah and Aliana, for the question. We now next call Abby. Your microphone is on now. Could you unmute? Abby, please unmute your microphone. Okay. So maybe while Abby is figuring that out, let's look into some of the other questions in our Q&A box. So the next question that we have here is Ecocide deliberately pushing the future of Palestine into the hands of imperialist countries and their global industrial and military complexes? So again, I'll repeat, is Ecocide deliberately pushing the future of Palestine into the hands of imperialist countries and their global industrial and military complexes? Okay, Mohammed, maybe you may want to take on that question.
Yep, happy to. Hi, everybody, again. So to answer the question of is Ecocide deliberately pushing Palestine to the hands of those in the global north, largely imperialists, capitalists, etc. I think I'd want to answer the question from two sort of places. The first is the change in narrative that we see in the rise of Zionism, kind of turning from, a very colonial mindset when colonialism was a trend across the globe, especially when a lot of other nations were practicing it very boldly. And then around the 1960s to the 1970s, the more so greenwashed narrative of Israel is making the desert bloom, and then the larger efforts of bringing in non-native trees to the land sort of began. That was essentially the start of this environmental kind of narrative of Zionism. But then we see also a lot of it coming with destruction of the land, with uprooting of trees in Gaza and in the West Bank, and then also the destruction of the Palestinian farmland that happened since 1948, but also way before that in 1920, in the 1920s, in the 1930s, and so on. But the second point to answer that question, especially when it comes to Gaza, is during the 2005 Gaza, sort of when Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. What happened then was not a sort of a withdrawal, but it was the complete absorption of Gaza's natural resources to the extent that they saw no further use of it in the ways that they initially had seen. And not only that, but it was already, there was already sort of that destruction and fragmentation of the land. As I said, the Gaza Valley had already been tarnished by the settlers at the time. So that sort of was the start of Ecocide as a strategy, but now the way that the strategy has shifted into, are they actually deliberately just trying to allow kind of for foreign intervention to come in? I remember one of the previous speakers, I think Basavi, was talking about development and sort of also like to an extent development washing this colonial conquest and complete havoc and destruction, annihilation of people. I would to an extent agree with the idea that the ecocide and genocide is an attempt to seize further control in the region and to take over the Gaza Strip, but it's not just to kill Palestinians. I think it's to further fragment the Palestinian political struggle, to create further fragmentation between the Palestinian internal politics. And we have seen how, considering the ceasefire kind of being set and then violated time and time again, how every ceasefire plan comes in with more foreign actors that come in with new ideas for profit. A lot of it is for tourism. A lot of it is with exploitation and energy deals. So I think there is that intent that's part of the larger strategy. But I hope that answers the question to some extent. But I cannot say that they committed the genocide just to push it to state actors outside of the sort of Middle East.
Okay. Thank you, Mohammed. Abby, would you still like to ask your question? Because it seems that you put down your hand. So again, we ask our participants to please feel free to ask your questions. This is our opportunity. So just raise your hand. So maybe we'll just go back to the first question and simplify it so that our speakers could respond. the question generally wants to ask, how do you view the rebuilding of Gaza, and who should be responsible for its rebuilding, given after the impact of the genocidal war and all? Who would like to go first? Go ahead, Mohammed.
I can go first, and if other panelists wish to contribute, then that would be great. I think it's a very straight sort of answer, and it's that the people who committed the genocide, there must be consequences and reparations that go much beyond the loss of land and the loss of life. It's not just about reparations. And although the harm that has been done, 99% of it, memory, heritage, culture, people, and lives, all of it is irreversible. The very bare minimum is the rebuilding of the land by those who committed the genocide. So the rebuilding has to be funded by the Israelis and Americans, in similar ways that we've seen post World War II with Germany. So these reparations that will have to be repaid, not just today, not just tomorrow, but for millennia to come, I think is the only answer. And we should not expect anything else. We should not expect Qatari Gulf kind of funds that allow for further kind of manufacturing of consent of relations and tarnishing of relations. And then we shouldn't allow for the standard kind of IMF World Bank development sort of issue that arises in every single war across the globe. So I think that's my answer there.
Thank you, Mohammed. We also stand the same for PCFS. Okay, Farah, would you like to chime in and answer the question?
I think Mohammed covered all the bases. I think maybe if we have other questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question. Hi, good evening. Coming here in the Philippines, and I'm a part youth sector. I have two questions. So first is, how can transparency, truth, and moral courage restore both the land of Palestine and the integrity of the Philippines? Second question is, what does it say about humanity when leaders enrich themselves while their people breathe dirty air, drink unsafe water, and lose their homes to floods or bombs? Okay. So I'll just repeat the question. How can transparency, truth, and moral courage restore both the land of Palestine and the integrity of the Philippines? And what does it say about humanity when leaders enrich themselves while their people breathe dirty air, drink unsafe water, and lose their homes to floods or bombs? So maybe Ray, you may want to go first, since it also mentioned the Philippines, and then maybe one of our Palestinian speakers could then respond.
Hi, okay. So with regards to the first question, and how can transparency, truth, and moral courage restore both the land of Palestine and the integrity of the Philippines? I think one of the factors of why the ongoing ecocide and genocide is happening in Palestine right now is the lack thereof of the transparency, truth, and moral courage. I think we have seen a lot of manifestation of these already. There has been a lot of ceasefires, and yet it has always been violated continuously. And I think with the because there's no transparency and definitely the lack of moral courage, it's always gonna be in the interest of those who are benefiting from the ecocide. So it's the Israel, it's the US. And so it's very crucial for us as we struggle towards the liberation of Palestine, and even in the Philippines, especially for those who doesn't know that we are currently in a state of an intense political crisis where a lot of corruption cases has also been being shared or being open out to the public. And that just goes to show how much it is more crucial for us in our struggle and for liberation to call for transparency, truth, and moral courage, as this will also be some of the things that we need in order to ensure that the system that we are building, the system that we are trying to change, or the system that we are hoping to have in the future is something that will be for the people and for the planet. And I think that just goes to show with the second question on what does it say? What does it say about humanity when leaders enrich themselves? With examples provided is that this is really a direct manifestation of how the current system is working in the favor of the imperialist nations, of these bureaucrat capitalist individuals that leaves the burden of alleviating themselves to the people. And this just goes to show the need to further collectivize, to further mobilize ourselves, to put pressure on such states like US, Israel, and other imperialist nations, because they are the one who are putting mechanisms that destroys our quality of air, that destroys our drinkable water, that destroys the homes to floods and bombs. It's really a call for humanity. It's we're not just blindly following our leaders anymore. It's actually coming to a point of collective action where it's important that we strengthen our people's movement on the ground, strengthen our people who are the victims of the climate crisis that we are experiencing today. And I think that involves our call for both in the Palestine and even in the Philippines, the call for transparency, truth, and definitely moral courage.
Thank you, Ray. How about our Palestinian speakers in response to that question? Would you like to respond? I could repeat if needed. So again, the question was, how can transparency, truth, and moral courage restore both the land of Palestine and integrity of the Philippines, and what does it say about humanity when leaders enrich themselves while their people breathe dirty air, drink unsafe water, and lose their homes to floods or bombs?
All right,
Go ahead,
do you want to take the
Mohammed.
question or should I? All right. I mean, so this is the case of green colonialism, where we see exploitation used within one's own context, even, and it is atrocious. It's terrible. It happens in all contexts, not just on a global corporations level, but happens even locally. Now, the Filipino kind of struggle, and the sort of era of resistance within their own culture, that kind of echoes and reverberates within Palestinian struggles. And I think the liberation movement in the Philippines that must exist for the Palestinians is already there, and it's just a matter of and the same way that it should be the case for every other country, people of struggle, the oppressed people of the world, and that being more than 95% of the world, should realize that our struggles are connected and that liberation is only a one-way ticket, and that is through resistance locally against oppression in your own community. So that could be inequality, could be racism, could be the very idea that your own government is having clean water and is having good food and is having the best kind of luxuries of life at the cost of the rest of the population. So that inequality, although minor, local, domestic, whatever, actually is very much connected to the global industries. Look at the case of Colombia. Colombians are boycotting Coca-Cola and Nestle and any other company that Palestinians should boycott, not because, I mean, a lot of them do that for Palestine, but the case is that they've been doing it not because of Palestine, but because of the fact that they've been killing unionists, trade unions, dock workers, fishermen, miners, and not only killing them, but exploiting them for millennia. And that is just for the sake of profit. This profit-driven world is going to continue driving evil and is going to ultimately be connecting not just evils, but also connecting our struggles for justice together. So it kind of unites us. We all live on one planet, on Mother Earth. The plan is to preserve it, save it, defend it, protect it. And we are not going to do that if we look at ourselves as people in isolation, especially in a world where we're all the most connected we ever were. So to me, I think the only way to preserve dignity, the only way to continue protecting yourself and people of the world is by standing up to inequality in your own community. And that could be as simple as just contributing to your community, doing community service, but also speaking up politically, looking at the deep links of injustice in your own government, in your own nation. I'll leave it there just because we're out of time, but happy to get questions. I think, Gail, if our information as panelists are provided to the participants, or they can reach out to you, and I'm happy to answer them via email. And I'm happy to provide any links or resources through your network. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mohammed. Actually, if I may, the answer to the question would be is to join people's movements that are struggling against oppression, exploitation, and imperialism. Okay, so I think we don't have any more time to accommodate more questions. So like Mohammed said, you may still send us your questions and our panelists are more than willing to answer them even after our webinar today. Okay, so again, thank you to all our panelists for sharing your expertise and experiences. Now to close our powerful discussion on ecocide in Palestine, here is Marco Sebastian Tueres of the Environment and Climate Justice Commission of the International League of People Struggle. Seb will provide a definitive synthesis that frames the crisis in Palestine within the global fight for environmental and climate justice and what this means for global solidarity and political action in the struggle for Palestine's liberation and in line with our International People's Tribunal. So go ahead, Seb.
All right, thank you, Gail. So, Milton, greetings to our comrades in struggle. I am Sebastian Tueres, representing the Commission 19 of the International League of People Struggles. As we have seen today in today's webinar, imperialist ecocide is not just a crime against nature. It is also a weapon of domination by colonial powers, most viciously wielded today by US imperialism and its Zionist allies in a genocidal assault against Palestine. The US regime is a chief architect and main sponsor of global wars of aggression, militarization, racist violence, and a devastation of ecosystems in pursuit of profit, plunder, and expansion. Across the globe, US imperialism drives climate catastrophe, famine, and forced displacement through bombs, blockades, military bases, and transnational corporations. Their arms, cargo planes, and genocidal wars rains death from above and poison the ground below, as we have seen in Gaza. What we have heard from our resource persons are not simply accounts of environmental destruction and the extermination of peoples, but the calculated erasure of their lands, waters, and culture. These acts of ecocide are orchestrated by the US military-industrial complex and perpetrated by its client regimes such as Israel. These are designed to break the will and the future of oppressed peoples who dare to speak of liberation. Now, across the globe, we see the same pattern of militarization and ecocide in countries oppressed by these imperialist powers, entangled with the geopolitics of war and extraction through settler colonial control. Earlier today, Dr. Basavi noted that India's indigenous people suffered landlessness, violent state actions, and corporate repression despite the nation's abundant natural resources. Wealthy interests repeatedly appropriate fertile land and mineral deposits without proper consultation or compensation, displacing communities, eroding cultures, and concentrating profits among the elites. In West Papua, corporations and the Indonesian military under the Prabowo regime exploit resources and suppress independence movements, with thousands killed, tens of thousands displaced to make way for mining and palm oil plantations. And Race Briefing, backed by the International Learning and Solidarity Mission, shows that massive deforestation, mining, land grabbing, and reclamation activities in the Philippines are protected by the military and private security forces, enabling landlords and bureaucrat capitalists to carry out forced evictions, red tagging, and other human rights abuses against indigenous and rural communities. Globally, militaries are major greenhouse gas emitters. The US military emits about 48 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide annually, comparable to entire countries, with US-led wars releasing about 440 million tons of carbon dioxide. The Gaza conflict alone generated 420,000 to 652,000 tons of carbon dioxide within its first 120 days, with reconstruction potentially adding 47 to 60 million tons more. Now, earlier, Farah and Mohammed already touched upon these subjects. The documented destruction of Gaza's agricultural lands reveal a systematic pattern of ecocide predating October 7. Al-Mazal's research showed that 35% of farmland was razed between 2000 to 2023 to create a no-go buffer zones, while forensic architecture has recorded repeated bulldozing of fields and homes and the aerial spraying of herbicides along the eastern border since 2014. These actions intended to seize land and erase evidence of prior life have devastated soil quality, food production, constituting unlawful environmental damage. Now, beyond outright land clearance, Israel's broader settler colonial policies also generate ecological harm. Francesca's Albanese report notes that Palestinian water consumption is restricted to have a fraction of what Israeli settlers use, about 1/3 of the per capita amount, while native olive groves are systematically uprooted and replaced with non-indigenous European pines to make it more European. Such deliberate alterations of the landscape's character and the denial of essential resources further exemplify ecocide, highlighting how environmental degradation can serve as a tool of dispossession and cultural erasure. The Commission on Environment and Climate Justice, the International League of People's Struggles, stands firmly and militantly beside the people of Palestine and all oppressed nations fighting back against imperialist aggression, fascism, ecocide, and war. We shall not be cowed or silenced. Now, together we shall expose ecocide as a weapon of imperialism. We call on all activists, mass organizations, and freedom fighters worldwide to intensify our mass campaigns, education, and on-ground struggles for liberation and environmental and social justice. Let us support, observe, and actively participate in the upcoming International People's Tribunal on the right to resist, the Palestinian people versus the Zionist occupation and the US government, happening on the 22nd to the 23rd of November. Let us show the world that the crime of imperialism will not go unpunished. By joining forces globally, we shall defeat imperialism, and then shall the planet and humanity truly be free. The right in Palestine, the resistance in Palestine is a struggle of all oppressed and exploited peoples. Down with imperialism, down with Zionist occupation, and long live international solidarity.
Long live international solidarity. So thank you, Seb, for that comprehensive sum up of our discussion today. And of course, thank you to all of our incredible speakers, to Farah, Mohammed, Basvi, and Ray. And of course, to all of you, our participants in the Zoom room, and those who are tuned in our live stream, for joining us today and listening to our very fruitful discussion. We hope that the presentations made it clear why efforts like the International People's Tribunal are essential. It is through this platform that we continue to hold the Zionists, the US, and other imperialist perpetrators accountable for their historic crimes of genocide and ecocide against the Palestinian people. While the tribunal serves as a crucial moral and legal forum, we know it is not an end in itself. The liberation of Palestine will be achieved by the Palestinian people themselves. The end of the Zionist occupation will be a powerful blow to the US-led war US-led war machine, serving the interests of all people fighting for liberation in their own homelands. The tribunal will be a space where the voices of the people will testify to their bravery and steadfastness against the crimes of ecocide, forced starvation, the destruction of cultural heritage, and other acts of genocide. We need your continued solidarity to make this tribunal a powerful tool for change. We encourage everyone, again, to visit the website where all of our information and updates are kept. So that's internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. You can also sign up for the Right to Resist email list to get regular updates on the preparations for the tribunal and other lead-up activities such as this one. You can also register to attend the tribunal in Barcelona through our website. We will also be publishing updates and resources via social media, so please do follow and subscribe to the Facebook and Instagram accounts of the organizers for the updates. So that's at PCFS Global, so no space, for the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, at International People's Front. So again, no space for the International People's Front, and IL at ILPS_official in Instagram, and ILPS official, so no space, no underscore, in Facebook for the International League of People Struggle. Please join the growing list of endorsers of the tribunal. Endorse at internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal-endorse. Again, the link is provided in the chat. If you have already endorsed, please encourage other organizations you work with to also endorse. Spread the word and tell them why you endorse and why they should endorse too. If you have not already done so, please consider sending us a video message expressing your endorsement that we can use to encourage others. You can send the 1 to 2 minute videos to outreach@internationalsolidarity.org. Alternatively, you could post them on your social media accounts. Just please tag PCFS, ILPS, and the IPF so that we could share. We also urge you to donate to support the work of the IPT. If you wish to donate, you can find the details on the donation page. Donation methods are listed there, and you can email the address on the page, info@internationalsolidarity.org, to talk about other methods for making a donation now. If you are a member of the press, please consider covering the tribunal and publishing articles written by our organizers and endorsers. We also have media spokespeople who are available for interviews upon request. Our press releases can be found on the website, and we will publish them on social media as well. We still have 2 more education sessions leading up to the tribunal, so please mark your calendars for the session on the right to resist and the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people. So that's on November 11th. And it will be followed by the session on what to expect at the tribunal, which will be held on November 16. So again, November 11, November 16. You can register for them on the website, and you may also look at the social media accounts of the organizers to be updated. They will also be announced via the email list, so be sure to sign up for the email list if you'd like to be kept up on these updates. Finally, we will be using the results of the tribunal to hold governments and other international institutions accountable for their support in the US Zionist genocide of the Palestinian people. There will be much work to do to present the verdict we pass to the world and advocate for systemic change at every level of governance. It will also help with popular education initiatives to increase the power of the mass movement of the people to assert the Palestinian right to resist. Even if you do not physically attend the tribunal this November in Barcelona, you can use the verdict to advocate and organize wherever you live in the world. We again encourage you to subscribe to the Right to Resist email so that you can be informed of how you can do this with the resources provided after the tribunal has concluded. And with that, we now formally close our educational session today. Again, my name is Gail from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty. And on behalf of our co-organizers, the Ground Zero Campaign, the International League of People Struggles, and the International People's Front, we thank you for joining us for today's session. And we hope to see you in the next activities until the tribunal. So with that, free Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you, everyone.